The glass made a sound I'll remember longer than her words. A soft clink on wood, followed by a red ring spreading across the table like a bullseye. Lauren always hated leaving marks on furniture. That night she set one down deliberately, as if she wanted the stain to outlast her sentence. "I've been seeing Brandon Miller for 6 months," she said. No preamble, no apology. Just a declaration dropped into the kitchen like a wrench off a scaffold. I, Michael Harris, did what my father drilled into me when life tried to tip me over. Count 3 breaths. 1, 2, 3. Then answer like a man, not a fool. "Thank you for the truth," I said, my voice steady enough to surprise even me. The air in the room felt heavy, like insulation dust in the lungs. Lauren leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, daring me to raise my voice, flip the table, and fulfill whatever script she had written in her head. Rage wanted my hands, wanted volume. But I've been in fights before, job sites, bars, parking lots. The loudest man never won. What I didn't account for was Ethan. Our son, 19, appeared in the doorway like a shadow I hadn't invited. He'd heard every word, and his face held that look boys get when they're deciding whether to spit on the ground or throw a punch. "So it's true," he said, his voice rough with youth and betrayal. "I told you, Dad. I told you something was off. You weren't here. You didn't see it." His eyes flicked between her and me, judgment already rendered. Lauren didn't blink. "Don't you dare put this on me, Ethan. Your father hasn't been present in years. Work the company." "Enough," I said, not loud but final. My hand pressed flat against the table, next to the crimson circle her wine had left. That mark, that ring became the whole picture. What she spilled, what she wasted, what she thought could be cleaned up with a cloth and a shrug. I looked at Ethan. "You're right. I wasn't here enough. That's on me. But what happened here, this decision, belongs to your mother." He wanted more. Wanted me to shout, to slam a fist, to take the burden of his anger. But that wasn't what this moment required. Control was the currency now. Lauren shifted, uncomfortable with my calm. She wanted a scene she could point to later. Michael lost it, Michael scared me, Michael proved me right. Instead, she got stillness. She got the slow burn of a man who knew the next 60 seconds were the hinge of everything that followed. I stood, pushed my chair back without scraping the tile. This conversation's over. Tomorrow's coming whether we like it or not. What matters is how we walk into it. Ethan's jaw clenched. He wanted answers I didn't have, comfort I couldn't give. All I could offer was the steadiness of a father who refused to fall apart in front of him. Lauren reached for her glass again, maybe to erase the mark, maybe to sip victory. I left her hand hovering in midair. In the garage, I leaned against the workbench where my father's old tools still hung in order. Hammers, wrenches, clamps. Everyone with a purpose. Everyone waiting for the right job. My anger sat beside them, not yet in my grip, but sharp and ready. This was not the night to swing it. This was the night to sheath it. Calm is not a weakness. It's the discipline to let your enemy wonder what you'll do next. And as I listened to the faint echo of voices from the kitchen, one thing settled hard in my chest. Tomorrow I'd act, but tonight I'd measure. Because whatever came next, custody, money, legacy, it would all grow from how I chose to handle the wine ring and the sentence. The highway south out of Columbus feels different at night. Farmhouses blink once every mile, truckers ride their high beams too long, and the road has a way of stretching like it doesn't want you to get where you're going. I didn't mind. Distance was the only thing I could afford that night. I left the house without slamming the door, without giving Lauren or Ethan a last word to hang their anger on. Just keys, wallet, jacket, and silence. The F-150 hummed steady beneath me, a machine that didn't ask questions. Dad's cabin sat 45 minutes down Route 33, tucked off a gravel spur by a lake that froze before Thanksgiving and thawed sometime around Easter. He'd bought it in the 70s with overtime checks from the plant. No mortgage, no frills, just wood and nails that outlasted him. The deed had my name now, but the place still felt like his voice might be waiting in the rafters. By the time I pulled in, the clock read close to midnight. I cut the engine and sat in the dark, listening to the cooling tick of metal. The cabin windows reflected the truck's faint glow, black squares staring back. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, flashlight in hand. The air carried dust, pine, and the faint ghost of tobacco from a man gone 10 years. No lights, no power, the breaker was still off. Just me, a beam of light, and the creak of old wood. I dropped my bag on the table and listened. No phone buzzing, no glass clinking, no footsteps but mine. That silence was medicine. The kitchen looked the same as it had when I was a boy, linoleum curling at the edges, cabinets with brass pulls dulled from years of hands. I filled the old kettle from the tap, struck a match and lit the propane stove. The hiss and click settled me more than any drink could. When the water boiled, I poured it over instant coffee in a chipped mug. The first swallow burned like a small punishment, and I welcomed it. Pain has a way of clearing the static. I sat at the table, mug in hand, and named the problem out loud because men who don't name their problems end up drowning in them. Betrayal, I said. The word clanged against the beams like steel dropped on concrete. Absence. My own indictment. Years buried in Harris construction, counting jobs instead of dinners. Pride. The worst of the three. Pride had let me think loyalty was permanent, that Ethan would always see me as unshakable, that Lauren's discontent was a storm that would blow past. Pride blinds a man. I took another swallow of bitter coffee and set the mug down hard enough to leave a ring next to Dad's old burn mark from a soldering iron. The urge to drive back, to pound on Brandon Miller's door, to make a scene that would echo in police reports. It tugged at me. But I knew the math. Men who fight with fists in parking lots lose their businesses, their reputations, their leverage. Men who fight with paper win. So I powered the phone down. The screen died with a last blink, and I felt lighter. No buzzing texts, no calls stacking up with advice or outrage. Just quiet. I pulled out a yellow legal pad from my bag, wrote today's date across the top, and scrawled 3 words underneath. Fight with paper. That was the promise. Not to shout, not to beg, not to brawl. To build a case brick by brick until it could hold my weight. Outside, the lake barely rippled under a half moon. Trees stood like sentries on the far shore. The world had a way of reminding you. Storms pass, but foundations matter. I leaned back in the chair and let the silence close around me. Tonight was for naming and promising. Tomorrow it will be for building. Morning came sharp and cold. I woke on the cabin's lumpy couch with my jacket draped over me and the faint taste of burnt coffee still in my mouth. My body ached from the drive, but my head was clearer than it had been in months. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was space to work. I pushed the table against the window for better light. The surface was scratched, stained with years of meals and repairs, but that morning it became something else. A war desk. Men have fought with worse. I laid out the tools. Yellow legal pad, folders I'd found in the old sideboard, pens, tape, paper clips. A flashlight battery rolled from the drawer and I set it aside like a spent shell casing. Then I wrote headings across the top of the pad. Bank, house, company, insurance, messages. Dad used to say, a man without a system is just a fire waiting to happen. I wasn't going to burn. The first call went to Mark Sullivan. He wasn't just my attorney. He was a man who'd seen storms like this flatten better men than me. Mark answered with his usual gravel, like his throat was made of grit and black coffee. Michael, he said. Not Mike, not Buddy. Just my name, heavy as a gavel. I told him the short version. Lauren's confession, Ethan overhearing my drive to the cabin. He didn't waste sympathy. Professional men don't when there's work to do. Listen, he said. Document everything. Don't negotiate at midnight. And check the accounts right now. If there's money missing, it matters more than who slept with who. That last line hit like a hammer. Affairs wreck homes, but money leaves trails. I opened the laptop I kept at the cabin for invoices and payroll, logged into our bank accounts, and started downloading statements. The numbers told a story more brutal than words. Transfers, withdrawals, ATM pulls across town I never made. Line items stacked like bricks in a wall I hadn't seen built. $200,000. Almost exactly, spread across 6 months, the same window Lauren had named Brandon Miller. I circled the numbers until the pen nearly tore through the paper. My hand shook, but not from rage. From clarity. This wasn't infidelity anymore. This was financial betrayal. This was leverage. I called Mark back. 200 grand, I said flatly. He exhaled once, the sound of a man already shaping strategy. Good. Keep copies. Don't move money yet. Print, scan, and back it up. We'll want a trail. Good. I asked. You'd rather have paper than rumor. Courts don't care about hurt feelings. They care about proof. That was the lesson. Paper beats story. Always. I pulled more records. Insurance, utilities, credit cards. Every page added weight to the folders now labeled in thick black ink. I stacked them on the table like sandbags against a flood. Around noon I forced myself to stop and eat a can of beans straight from the tin. Food wasn't flavor that day, it was fuel. My father used to say a man who forgets to eat forgets how to think. As I chewed, I thought about Brandon Miller. His name had floated around town for years. Flashy suits, too many smiles, investment pitches at golf clubs. I'd never shaken his hand, but I knew the type. The kind who bets on charm, not on steel beams or poured concrete. The kind who burns other people's work like kindling. And now I had his fingerprints all over my accounts. I pictured him leaning across a bar table, selling Lauren on sure things. I pictured her nodding, sliding checks across counters, telling herself it wasn't theft if it was for a future she believed in. My jaw clenched hard enough to pop. I could have driven straight to him, could have settled it with words or worse, but the thought passed like a match snuffed between fingers. That would give him theater. I was building something better, a case. By late afternoon, the war desk looked like command central. Folders stacked by subject. Notes on the yellow pad in block letters. A second pad with dates and times. I leaned back in the chair and let my eyes trace the order I'd made from chaos. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt taller in my own skin. Lauren thought she'd broken me with one sentence and a wine ring. Brandon thought charm could gut 200 grand from my life. They both underestimated the one thing I'd kept. Discipline. Paper beats story. And I was just getting started. I started with the floor because men who won't get on their knees to do a job have no business calling themselves disciplined. The shop roared like a small engine while I dragged it corner to corner, eating 10 years of dust and lake grit. I pulled the old rugs, beat them on the porch until my shoulders burned, and swept the boards in long, steady strokes. The room felt bigger with each bag I filled. Order isn't control, but it's the first door you have to push through to get there. The breaker box complained when I flipped it. Lights hesitated, then steadied low-watt fixtures coming back from a long sleep. I oiled the sticky front hinge, tightened the loose screws on the back latch, and ran the tap until the rusty stutter gave way to clear water. Small winds stack. The cabin exhaled. I scrubbed the kitchen counters with hot water and a splash of bleach, then took a razor blade to the coffee rings Dad left behind. Not to erase him, he earned his marks, but to remind myself every stain can be cut down if you put a sharp edge to it. When I finished, the laminate looked almost honest again. Old, but ready to work. In town, Reggie Carson was stocking paint rollers at the hardware store. He'd been there since I was a kid, broad-shouldered, slow-talking, eyes that weighed men and totals at the same time. I put a fireproof lockbox, a portable scanner, a stack of file folders, and 2 boxes of contractors' trash bags on the counter. I added a label maker because clarity saves time and a mechanic's headlamp because both hands free beats fumbling. "Are you redoing the place or getting ready for court?" Reggie asked, sliding items across the scanner without looking down. "Both," I said. He grunted approval, then slipped a rolled pack of heavy-duty bags into the pile I hadn't asked for. "On the house," he said. "Guy with receipts wins. Guy with trash bags doesn't leave a mess behind." Advice between men doesn't need more words than that. Back at the cabin, I set the lockbox in the hall closet where the wall studs were closest together and lag-bolted a steel cable to the framing before looping it through the box handle. I wasn't hiding gold bars, only the thing thieves ignore, Proof. I fed it the passports, birth certificates, the original cabin deed, and the fresh stack of bank statements. The satisfying thunk of the lid closing put air in my lungs. I cleared the kitchen table and rebuilt the war desk clean. Bank, house, company, insurance, messages. New folders wore their labels like nameplates. I ran the headlamp while I scanned every page and saved each PDF twice. One to the laptop, one to a small solid-state drive that went straight into the lockbox. Then I backed the whole folder to an encrypted archive on a thumb drive. Belt, suspenders, and a hand on your waistband, like Dad used to say when something mattered. The trash bags swallowed what didn't. Junk mail, catalogs, bent nails, dead pens, Lauren's birthday cards I'd kept out of habit. Not bitterness, selection. A soldier doesn't carry souvenirs into a fight. The cabin cleared another inch. When the light started to fade, I made a pot of strong coffee and opened a fresh legal pad. Across the top I printed, plain language statement. Lawyers write in statutes. Judges live on facts. Men like me need to bridge the two with the kind of sentences that land. I wrote like I was reading to a stranger on a lunch break. I am Michael Harris, owner of Harris Construction, married to Lauren Harris. On date, Lauren disclosed a 6-month affair with Brandon Miller. Between date and date, approximately $197,840 left our joint accounts without my authorization. These withdrawals correspond to texts referencing Brandon's investments. I did not consent. I did not benefit. I did not receive consideration. Short sentences. No adjectives. Numbers where feelings tried to sneak in. Next came the timeline. Left margin, dates. Right margin, proof. March 14th, $25,000 wire. Account ending 2041. Bank PDF, page 3. April 2nd. Brandon says guaranteed, text from Lauren. Screenshot A. May 19th, $9,800 cashier's check. Bank PDF, page 11. Teller initial Elam. June 6th. He needs bridge money text. Screenshot B. By the time July bled into August on paper, the pattern was a fence you couldn't slip through. Money out, promise in, nothing back. I took the company folder next. Articles of incorporation, operating agreement, copies of equipment titles, payroll ledgers. Everything that proved Harris Construction wasn't a marital hobby. It was mine before the vows and mine after. I snapped photos of every serial number on major tools, then printed the images two to a page and stapled them to the equipment list. A thief can argue ownership. He can't argue a stamped VIN. On the house, I printed the deed, last appraisal, mortgage statement. I sketched a simple asset sheet, estimated sale price, principal remaining, equity, and a line labeled offset, $200,000. Seeing that subtraction on paper turned anger into arithmetic. Judges understand subtraction. I opened the messages folder and, with a breath, organized screenshots without reading them twice. You take poison once, not every hour on the hour. Each image got a file name, YYYYMMDD_HHMM_Cinder_Kiphrase. Messy stories become clean exhibits when you number them. By 9, the cabin smelled like coffee and Windex. I stacked the finished binders and slid a cover sheet into each. Title, date range, page count, checksum hash from a little utility I'd installed. Overkill? Maybe. But Mark once told me he'd never lost a hearing where his exhibits were thicker and neater than the other side's story. Judges respect men who respect the process. I stood in the doorway and looked at the room. Surfaces cleared. Tools hung straight. Files squared. The headlamp sat on the table like a crown I hadn't asked for but earned by effort. My anger hadn't cooled. It had condensed, like steam turning back to water. Heavier, more useful. I wrote one last line on the pad and underlined it twice. Fight in the arena that counts. The lake settled to glass. Somewhere across the water a dog barked twice and stopped. I killed the lights and let the quiet rebuild the walls inside me. Tomorrow I'd go home, not to reconcile but to enforce terms. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're gates a man builds so he can choose who walks through. And I was done leaving them open. Mark Sullivan's voice carried the weight of a man who'd sat through too many dissolving marriages to bother with ceremony. "Move back in," he said. "Not as a husband trying to patch holes, but as a man defending property. Judges respect stability. Document everything. Separate quarters. No late-night shouting matches." So I did. The East guest room was where Lauren used to keep her seasonal clothes and holiday decorations. I hauled her tubs into the hall, set my duffel on the bed, and claimed the space without asking. That act alone reset the lines. This was no longer her house with me haunting it. It was our house, split clean down invisible borders. I sent the rules by text because paper beats story. Civil communication only. No hallway debates. All scheduling through text or email. Receipts and statements stored in the kitchen file box. Her reply was a single line. "This is absurd." My response, "It's a procedure." The kitchen confrontation came 2 nights later. Lauren had wine in her hand again, as though the stem of a glass was a weapon. She tried the angle of guilt, shifting the weight onto me. I'd been absent, too wrapped in Harris construction, too proud to see what she needed. I let her talk until she circled herself. Then I placed 3 sheets of paper on the counter. Bank statements, black and white, with her signature on withdrawals she couldn't explain. Right beside them, an article clipped from the Columbus Dispatch. Local broker Brandon Miller linked to fraud investigation. Her face drained like a sink losing water. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't drag this through court." "I'm not dragging anything," I said. "I'm documenting." That was when Ethan charged in. He'd been listening again. 19-year-olds always listen harder when they shouldn't. His fists were balled, his shoulders tight, and his eyes darted between us like he was picking sides in a bar fight. "You're both destroying this family," he snapped. "Mom made a mistake. But you weren't here, Dad. You let it happen." The words hit, but I didn't flinch. If he wanted volume, he wouldn't get it from me. "This family ended," I said slowly, "the moment your mother chose someone else." The sentence hung in the air like a nail driven clean. Ethan froze, chest heaving, unable to dodge it. Lauren looked away, blinking fast, the kind of blink that hides tears with anger. I picked up the papers, slid them into a folder, and returned to my guest room without slamming a door. Boundaries aren't punishments, they're structure. And I just built the first wall. Lying on the guest bed, I stared at the ceiling fan circling lazily. My anger hadn't cooled. It had hardened. Every move from here forward would be like setting rebar in concrete, slow, deliberate, permanent. Calm wasn't forgiveness. It was a strategy. And strategy was the only language left worth speaking. Courthouses all smell the same. Polish, dust, old coffee, and nerves. Franklin County was no different. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the marble floor reflected men who'd walked into this building thinking they'd leave whole. Most didn't. Mark Sullivan met me at the security checkpoint with 2 binders under his arm and the face of a man who'd already planned 10 moves ahead. He didn't waste words. "Stay steady, answer what's asked, nothing more." We climbed to the family division. Courtroom for B was half full. The audience rows scattered with people waiting for their own collisions. Judge Diane Hartman sat high and square, glasses perched low, her expression a warning. She'd seen every excuse twice and had no patience left for rehearsed tears. Richard Caldwell, Lauren's attorney, slick in a dark suit, opened with his playbook, painting marital lifestyle like it was a sacred right. Trips, cars, dinners, the house. Mrs. Harris merely sought to preserve the standard of living this couple enjoyed. He said, voice syrupy, turning toward the judge with palms open. Mark waited, calm as a man trimming a board flush. Then he slid Exhibits A and B across the table. Bank records with withdrawals circled, text screenshots with Brandon Miller's name bolded in blue bubbles. Judge Hartman skimmed the pages, expression unchanged. Mark stood. "Your Honor, my client did not authorize these transfers. They occurred during the exact period Mrs. Harris admits to her affair with Mr. Miller. These are not expenditures for family living. These are diversions." Caldwell shifted, already knowing the ground was slipping. When it was my turn, I walked to the stand and swore in. The wood felt solid under my palm, and I reminded myself, calm is not weakness. Mark kept me in short bursts, just like we'd rehearsed. What's your name? Michael Harris. Occupation? Owner? Harris Construction. Did you authorize the withdrawals? No. Did you benefit from them? No. Were they presented to you for consent? No. Truth in short sentences travels further than speeches. Then Caldwell took his shot. He pushed for negligence. Did I pay attention to our accounts? Did I question my wife's activities? Wasn't this just the natural ebb and flow of marriage? I didn't flinch. I trusted my wife until she gave me reason not to. I didn't authorize those transfers. Trust doesn't equal consent. The words landed like nails driven square. Lauren shifted in her chair, eyes red, and Caldwell tried one last angle. Mrs. Harris, were these transfers intended for your family's future? Lauren's voice cracked, but not in my favor. They were for Brandon's investments. He said it was safe. I gave him the money. Michael didn't know. Silence took the room. Judge Hartman leaned forward. Her pen tapped once against the bench. Ownership of Harris Construction remains with Mr. Harris. Spousal withdrawals linked to Mr. Miller are taken under advisement. Temporary orders to follow. The gavel wasn't a bang, just a firm click, but it sounded like a foothold digging into rock. Caldwell's smile curdled. Lauren kept her eyes down. Mark closed the binders with a snap, turned to me, and muttered low. That held. In the hallway, people brushed past us toward their own hearings. I stood still, binder under my arm, and felt something shift inside me. Not triumph, something quieter, more useful. Proof had weight, and for the first time since the wine ring on the table, I felt the floor under me solid. This wasn't the end. It was the first beam set true. News in a small town doesn't walk, it runs. By the time the dispatch dropped Brandon Miller's name on the evening segment, the phones lit up across Franklin County like a thunderstorm on radar. Investment advisor linked to multi-woman fraud scheme. The headline carried teeth. I didn't need to call anyone. Word carried itself. At Harris Construction, a supplier leaned across the counter and said, "Hell of a thing about Miller." At the gas station, a man I barely knew nodded slowly. The kind of nod that says we saw, we know, we won't forget. Lauren felt it harder. Board seats that used to welcome her went quiet. A listing she was marketing with a realtor friend suddenly shifted timing. Calls that once rang steady now went to voicemail. Betrayal in private is one thing. Betrayal lit up on the 6 o'clock news is another. I didn't gloat. That's theater. What mattered was proof moving outside the courtroom. Validation written in the kind of ink no lawyer can cross out. Ethan was the one I worried about. 19 years old, half a man, half a boy, caught between loyalty to his mother and disappointment in his father. So I asked him to meet me at the park. Neutral ground. We sat on a wooden bench under a flickering streetlight, cold wind off the river pushing leaves across the path. He didn't look at me at first, just chewed his cheek and kicked at gravel like it might give him answers. I didn't start with speeches. I opened the folder I'd brought. Bank statements, highlighted transfers, Brandon's texts printed in black and white. I didn't push them into his hands, just set them on the bench between us. "Look at it when you're ready," I said. He stared at the folder like it might burn him. After a minute, he flipped it open. His eyes moved quickly at first, then slowed. His breath changed. By the third page, his shoulders sagged under the weight of what he couldn't deny. "So it's real," he muttered. "All of it." "Paper doesn't lie," I said. He shut the folder and pressed his palms together. "What do we do now?" "Not what you do, but we." That word mattered more than anything. "We start small," I told him. "Wednesday dinners. Just you and me. One night a week. No fights. No guilt. Brick by brick." He nodded, still staring at the folder. "I don't want to hate her, but I don't know how not to." "You don't have to decide today," I said. "Some things you carry. Some things you set down. Tonight, just carry the truth." He exhaled long and hard, then looked at me for the first time in weeks. No forgiveness, no smile, but something steadier. Recognition. Maybe. That weekend, he came to the cabin. I had wood stacked high, and I handed him gloves without preamble. We split logs, stacked them neat against the wall, and carried the rhythm together. No speeches, just work. Men find peace in sweat when words fall short. By sunset, the pile stood taller than either of us. Ethan wiped his face with his sleeve, looked at the wall of wood, and said, "Feels solid." I clapped his shoulder once. That's the point. The town could whisper, the news could run, Lauren could dodge calls. But here, under our hands, we built something honest. Small tasks that made larger truths carryable. And for the first time since the wine ring on the table, I believed the light on my porch could shine again. The second time I walked into courtroom 4B, it didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like a job site. Numbers, measurements, weight distribution. Get it wrong and the structure collapses. Get it right and the thing stands for decades. Judge Hartman sat steady as ever, glasses low, her pen already moving. The gallery was thinner this time. No curiosity seekers. Just a handful of spouses and attorneys waiting their turn. Lauren sat 2 rows up with Caldwell at her side, posture tight, hair pinned too perfectly. The look of someone bracing for impact. Mark leaned in as we waited. "Remember," he said, "we're not here to win applause. We're here to get alignment." The hearing started with Caldwell again pressing lifestyle. He argued for spousal support as if the last 6 months were a dream Lauren had slipped into, not choices she made. She maintained the household, he insisted. She was a partner in image and standing. Mark let him run. Then he stood, voice clear and sharp as a nail gun. "Your honor image doesn't pay the mortgage. Standing doesn't refill accounts drained by unauthorized transfers. Exhibit C, adjusted ledgers. Exhibit D, fraud probe documentation on Brandon Miller. Exhibit E, a timeline connecting both." I didn't move, didn't blink. I just watched the documents pass from clerk to judge. Paper that carried more weight than any raised voice ever could. When it was my turn to testify, I kept to the line we'd drawn. Yes, I own Harris Construction outright. Yes, the business predated our marriage. No, my wife did not contribute capital or labor. Yes, I discovered unauthorized withdrawals totaling approximately $200,000. No, I did not consent. Short sentences, each one a brick. Lauren took the stand. Caldwell tried to soften her edges, to paint her as misled, well-intentioned, hopeful. But under cross, she admitted it plainly. "I gave Brandon the money. Michael didn't know." That sentence weighed more than anything I'd said. Judge Hartman spoke with the precision of someone who knew half measures only breed appeals. Temporary orders as follows. Spousal support limited and adjusted downward in consideration of unauthorized withdrawals. The marital home is to be sold. Proceeds divided with an offset of $200,000 in Mr. Harris's favor. Harris Construction remains confirmed as Mr. Harris's separate property. No fanfare, no crescendo, just alignment, like a door finally hung true on its hinges. Mark slid the papers toward me, finger tapping where to sign. His whisper carried iron. "This is the turning point." I signed, pen steady. In the hallway afterward, Ethan waited. He didn't smile, smiles belong to boys. He nodded once, a man's gesture, quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted. Not forgiveness, not celebration. Just respect. That was enough. Precision beats catharsis. Courtrooms aren't built for theater. They're built for terms. And today, the terms bent in my direction. I walked out lighter, not louder. The condo door closed with a sound I liked. Firm, clean, no rattle. A good latch, the kind you trust when the wind kicks up. I'd bought the riverfront place for its bones, not its shine. 2 bedrooms, brick walls, view of the water. Modest, steady, mine. I moved in with 3 things that mattered. My toolbox, because a man without tools is just waiting on someone else. A box of oatmeal, because mornings don't stop for grief. And a single photo, Dad grinning wide, holding a stringer of fish on this same river 40 years ago. That picture reminded me where backbone comes from. The first weekend, Ethan came over. I grilled burgers on the small patio while he poked around the half-finished space. We didn't talk about Court or Lauren. We talked about pressure, pipes, beams, people. How steady pressure breaks the weak spots but also holds things together if applied right. He nodded, chewing slowly, and we agreed Wednesday dinners would stay. No speeches, no contracts, just a habit built brick by brick. Lauren called a week later, said she was leaving for the West Coast, and wanted to meet before she went. I agreed, not out of nostalgia but because some sentences deserve to be spoken face to face. We sat at Morgan's Cafe, the smell of citrus cleaner mixing with fresh pie. Afternoon light cut across the booths. She looked smaller than I remembered, tired in a way makeup couldn't cover. "I'm sorry," she said. "No props, no wine glass. Just words. I told Ethan first to hurt you. I thought you deserved it. I was wrong." I nodded. Not cold, not warm. "Thank you for the truth. That was all. I didn't ask for reasons. I didn't offer forgiveness. Truth was enough." When we stood, she reached for a handshake. I gave it. Brief, firm, nothing lingering. Then I walked out into the sun. Back at the condo, I set the tools in their place, made a pot of oatmeal, and looked at the river sliding past outside. The quiet didn't feel empty anymore. Felt earned. I had my name, my work, my son, and four walls that finally told no lies. Peace doesn't come with music. Comes with a latch clicking shut, steady and sure. And that was enough.
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.